Hello, we'll just be getting started in a minute to let some stragglers dial into the webinar, so sit tight and we'll be back in a sec. Hello and welcome to today's webinar, The Age of Consumption, Hosting and Cloud Transformation Summit 2018 Q&A. My name is Cassie Rowe, Content Marketing Specialist at 451 Research. Before we dive into today's content and meet our analyst panel, just a few housekeeping items. The webinar slides can be downloaded in the attachment and links section of the BrightTalk platform. The webinar recording will be available immediately after today's session. If we do have time for additional questions, you can submit them in the same BrightTalk platform screen, but we do only have 30 minutes today, so we'll see what we can do. Without further ado, let's get started with a brief introduction to 451 Research and HCTS. 451 Research is a top-tier research and advisory firm headquartered in New York City, providing unique insight into emerging disruptive technologies and the companies taking them to market. Our team of more than 100 analysts deliver that insight via syndicated research, advisory services, and live events around the world. Our Hosting and Cloud Transformation Summit, which we abbreviate to HCTS, is a premier forum for executives in the hosting, cloud, data center, and managed services sectors. For 14 years, the agenda is carefully crafted by 451 Research analysts and industry experts to provide timely, actionable insight into the competitive dynamics of innovation. To start our discussion of the summit, we have three 451 Research Vice Presidents here with us today, Kelly Morgan, Al Sadowski, and Melanie Posey. Hello, everyone. How are you today?
Hello.
Hey there.
All right, great to have you all. I'd like to start the discussion today by asking, what is the age of consumption? Kelly, would you like to start us off?
Sure. Well, the story of cloud is that of automating IT, really, and spreading consume-as-you-go models for IT infrastructure. And this frees up organizations to focus their IT resources on things that will differentiate their business as they spend less time and money installing infrastructure and managing IT. So as we enter from the age of sort of building clouds and building back-end infrastructure, we're really moving to this age of consumption where the way IT departments operate is shifting, their relationship to the rest of the organization is changing, and this is having a huge impact on the enterprises, on cloud providers, and on other firms that provide IT infrastructure and services. So how to respond to these changes, that's really what we'll be talking about at HCTS. Melanie, do you want to add?
Yes, thanks a lot, Kelly. To reiterate on Kelly's point, the age of consumption is all about buy versus build. And one of the different things we're seeing in this age of consumption is that, who are the builders and who are the buyers? As Al Sadowski, who's up next, will mention that the builders are the service providers, and here the buyers or the consumers are the enterprise customers and, in some cases, other service providers. So, therefore, IT resources, IT capabilities become a consumable that go into other deliverables, which in the case of enterprise is enterprise value, differentiation, and competitive advantage. Al?
Yeah, I guess that stuff's great. And the only thing that I would add to that, again, from that service provider lens, our research is showing that they're less likely to build data centers and instead consume resources from data center providers. They're more likely now to automate resource management rather than adding a lot of headcount to manage those resources. They're moving towards OpEx models rather than CapEx models for hardware and software vendors, looking more for utility pricing, consuming resources more as a service, and building pay-as-you-go models rather than building stuff up front. So they're acting more like enterprises themselves.
Wow, that's definitely a big change from how things currently or have previously been. And I can't wait to dive into all your research around this kind of broader topic. But let's start with Melanie, who will actually be hosting the Beyond Cloud Service Provider Opportunity and Continuing Evolution of IT Enterprise at HCTS. So first, Melanie, do you at all want to give some background onto Voice of the Enterprise?
Yes, I'll give a brief overview of our Voice of the Enterprise product, which provides actionable insight into enterprise IT. This is a quarterly survey deliverable, which also includes in-depth interviews with our panel of IT decision makers, influencers, and commentators. And with the Voice of the Enterprise product, what we do is to help customers identify where the IT market opportunity is based on what enterprises are doing, based on the pace of technology adoption, based on what types of categories of IT spending are increasing or decreasing, and also what their overall perceptions are of vendors and how they go about vendor selection.
Awesome. And sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and with that, I will jump into the meat of my presentation on today's webinar to give you a taste of what some of the issues we'll be tackling on the panel I'll be moderating at HCTS in Las Vegas next month. One of the big things that's come out of our research over the last couple of years is this idea of multi-cloud and hybrid IT. And we're seeing it emerge as the new normal as the way that IT resources are organized and consumed within enterprises. We asked our panel a question, a fairly general question, about which of the following best describes your IT approach and strategy going forward. And what we found overall was that IT environments will be characterized by a mix of on-premises and off-premises IT, where 58% of our respondents mentioned that they were moving to a hybrid IT environment. And the way we define that here at 451 is it's a combination of on-premises systems and off-premises clouded and hosted resources. One of those off-premises destinations is the hyperscale infrastructure as a service public clouds, but that's not the only destination off-prem where enterprise IT resources will live. There's a broader off-premises universe that includes hosted private cloud, managed services, and co-location, which are then integrated with among themselves and also to the hyperscale IaaS providers, and then back again to on-premises resources in enterprises' own data centers. So that's going to be the predominant mode of IT organization and architecture going forward. And we see that there are smaller percentages of our respondents who are looking at other models. About 18% of folks are looking at a completely off-premises public cloud environment, what we've heard a lot about as being all in on public cloud. And that's a big number, but not quite as big as you'd expect from what we've been hearing over the last couple of years about how IT is moving en masse off-premises to from on-premises to off-premises environments. That is happening, but the reality is that we're in a hybrid IT world, and we're going to be there for quite a while yet. Next, I wanted to take a quick look at some of the issues related to this future of IT, which will be both on-premises and cloud. It'll be hybrid, it'll be multi-cloud, but with change comes disruption. And one of the disruptions we've been seeing among enterprises is the whole idea that maybe the skills aren't in place quite yet in order to navigate this new world of multi-cloud and hybrid IT. In this slide, I've combined a couple of questions that we asked. One question that I asked was about what are some of the most important cloud skills going forward for your organization? And then we also took that same list and asked folks to say, where are you most lacking in those skills? And anytime you do one of these surveys, you always get security expertise at the top of the list as something that's lacking. And the point there is that security is always a challenge for organizations. And as technology changes, the security challenges change as well. The next area is cloud platform expertise, which it's a key skill, but it's in short supply. So the key takeaway from this slide is that there are a lot of skills that are needed to move forward in the multi-cloud hybrid IT world. To the extent that they're lacking within enterprises, they have to find some way to fill those skills gaps. And one way that we're increasingly seeing is turning to external vendors and service providers in order to either acquire those skills or hand over responsibility for building and management to those service providers. And with that, I will pass it along to Kelly.
Great. Thank you, Melanie. So Kelly will be discussing here about the main impacts of the age of consumption in a couple different areas. But at HCTS, she will be hosting a tech M&A panel. So be sure to check that out if you're going to be joining us in Las Vegas. My first question for you, Kelly, is what are the impacts of the age of consumption in relation to multi-tenant data centers or data center service providers?
Thank you. Yes, so we have our data center knowledge base where we track over 4,000 multi-tenant or really leased data centers around the world, both public and private. And so we use those to generate our growth forecasts and things like that. And on the data center side, the era of consumption, of course, has had a huge impact, and cloud providers have really been both a friend and a foe. For retail colocation providers, some of their enterprise colocation business has gone to cloud, right? They've lost business. Some of that has gone away. However, new opportunities have opened up, as really both Al and Melanie mentioned. Many enterprises want help with cloud. They don't necessarily have the staffing that they would like. They need help to take the best advantage of cloud and to figure out what should go where. So there's increasing demand for cloud wrapper, what I think of as cloud wrapper services. So everything from planning to migration to security. This is an opportunity for all sorts of players, managed services, data center providers, managed hosting firms, systems integrators. There are all kinds of firms that can help with this. And then in addition, in kind of the larger picture and where we get to this slide, for the big wholesale data center providers, so just for demand for pure data center space, cloud firms have been major customers. And as Al said, managed service providers have increasingly been major customers as well. They're leasing space from data center providers, especially in particular markets such as Montreal and Northern Virginia, which are the fastest growing markets in North America. As you can see from this chart, Montreal has been growing roughly 30% a year, Northern Virginia roughly 20%. And for Northern Virginia, which is the largest market in the world, a 20% growth rate is a huge amount of space being added every year. And that's largely due to demand from cloud and IT firms and increasingly from service providers more broadly. We believe strong demand for this data center space will continue. So it's going to continue to be a strong sector that way. Go ahead, Cassie.
Great. Yeah, great. I think that that's really informative, especially kind of doing a different twist on what the service provider kind of area is looking like. But Al will definitely dive more into that later in this Q&A. But for now, can we kind of get a little taste of what your M&A panel is going to look like and think about the impacts of the age of consumption on mergers and acquisitions?
Sure, yes. I always enjoy the M&A panel at HCTS, where we talk about funding of this very, very capital-intensive sector, but also about M&A activity more broadly. So we track M&A in our M&A knowledge base, which is much broader. Here I present a cut of just the activity in the data center and hosting and managed services categories, but we track M&A activity for the IT sector very, very broadly. We have thousands of records in there going back for years and years. So at the M&A panel, we'll typically talk about the consolidation in the data center and managed services industry, which has been underway for quite a while. On the data center side, that's partly because there are economies of scale in this business. So for the largest data center operators, they're continually looking for opportunities to acquire. But also, it's been very interesting. There are a lot more investors interested in the sector now and looking for data center firms to buy. So they also have been contributing quite a bit. As you can see, last year, I do a September to September tracking, and last year was the highest in terms of value on record. And this year, even just up through July, we're certainly doing well on the number of deals, and the deal value is pretty strong as well. Probably won't be as strong as last year, but still a lot going on in the sector. There are also plenty of smaller managed services firms, and they're attractive due to, as we mentioned before, the growth of this demand for cloud wrapper services, demand for other managed services in general. So a lot of firms are looking to either acquire areas that they're missing, technologies and staff that they're missing, or investors are looking to get into this sector and find the next kind of a way to invest in cloud that's not just investing in the top 5 cloud providers, public cloud providers. So we'll have an update of this chart at HCTS, but we can already see a strong year in M&A this past year, and we expect that to continue going forward for a while as well.
That's definitely good to hear for anyone who's looking to buy some tech companies. So next we'll talk to Al. Sorry, BrightTalk's being a little touchy today. Al will be discussing at HCTS about building partnerships with the hyperscalers and why that is an important goal for service providers going forward. Al, I know that you have a lot of exciting stuff going on with the new Voice of the Service Providers product, which was just introduced this year. Do you want to give a brief introduction to that before I ask you one of our first questions?
You bet. So we announced the plans for Voice of the Service Provider last year at HCTS actually, and since then we have since launched 2 quarters worth of research. We started Voice of the Service Provider to quantify service provider buying behaviors, their business drivers, strategic priorities. In this, what we're calling, this age of consumption, the public cloud providers, the hosters, the MSPs, the system integrators, telcos, colos, they're playing a more strategic role. So there's a lot of interest in what they're up to, especially amongst the hardware, software, and services vendors that are out there. And in I'll be moderating a panel with a few hyperscalers to talk about their role in the ecosystem moving forward.
Awesome. So I guess the first question we should ask regarding hyperscalers is, why are hyperscalers both a friend and a foe to other service providers?
Yeah, it's interesting because I've been at 451 for over 5 years now, and I started out talking to service providers, and they would talk about how they are competing with the likes of Amazon and Google, at the time. Azure wasn't fully on the radar for most at that time. And a couple years later, it was service providers talked about how they were different from the big hyperscalers, and they were no longer trying to compete on price. And now we got service providers from all over the place that are now looking to the hyperscalers to provide resources that they don't have the skills to provide, or that are necessary to provide anymore. So as part of Voice of the Service Provider, we survey 220. This was from the second quarter. We surveyed 229 service providers across the U.S., the U.K., India, and China, and we asked them, hey, what do you think about the hyperscalers? And it's AWS, it's Microsoft, it's Google, Alibaba, companies like that. And it's interesting that only 14% of them don't even partner with the hyperscalers. So 86% of those we surveyed, 86% of service providers are leveraging the large hyperscalers, and they're using them, in a large part, 4 out of 10, to just provide network connectivity or provide managed services. But they're also using them, so rather than building their own machine learning capabilities or building their own serverless function capabilities, they're leveraging those features from service providers. Yeah, they're still competing for enterprise workloads, but in some cases, those service providers are leveraging the hyperscalers to provide those services to enterprises.
Interesting. So would you say that hyperscalers and service providers are looking more at joining vendor partner programs in that respect, or?
Yeah, so in the case of vendor partner programs, so every hardware vendor, every software vendor has some service provider channel or some mechanism for service providers to be more engaged with the vendors. And even some of the large hyperscalers have their own partner programs themselves. So to the same panel, we asked them their motivations for joining a partner program. In this particular case, this is the view of why they join hardware vendors, but we ask a similar question about why they join software vendor programs as well. They were able to choose, up to 3. And I just pulled out a couple just for discussion's sake, but there's a large list of reasons why. But in the case of both hardware vendors and software vendor partner programs, the main reason that service providers are signing up is they want training. They want access to the technical experts to help them. Think about the service providers themselves. They're trying to roll out new products, new services. They need to stay lean. They need to automate, and they're leaning on the vendor community to help them with training. The other things that they're looking to do is to have influence over the roadmap. They want to be intimately involved to make sure that their requirements are heard as the hardware and software vendors are adding to their portfolio. Helping with their go-to-market plans is also helpful. Plus, hey, they want the customer referrals. But, some would think that a big reason to join a program is, they want marketing dollars, and that's really low on the totem pole here. It was amongst the lowest at 9% as far as the reasons why, and that's consistent across hardware and software. And the one last one there at the bottom, 4%. So 96% of all the service providers are a member of the vendor partner program. So vendors really have shifted their focus. As Melanie indicated, enterprises are starting to shift their workloads to off-premise third-party data centers and public cloud resources. So now the vendors are more interested in ensuring that the service providers that are providing those services are getting the attention that once was really focused on the enterprise.
Great, thank you, Al. I know I'm personally looking forward to your session at HCTS, and all of your sessions definitely will be really interesting, and I hope our dear audience today thinks so as well. So There is still time to register for HCTS. I know it is next month. Our summit will be held from September 24th to 26th at the Bellagio in Las Vegas. It's a great time. We all really enjoy ourselves. We're going to cover many of the topics we discussed today regarding the age of consumption, as well as how it applies to not only the service providers, cloud technologies, and tech M&A as we discussed today, but also how it impacts IoT, edge computing, and so much more. So we hope to see you there. If anyone else here wants to give a tidbit of what they love about HCTS before we sign off, I think that would be a great way to end our webinar today.
Yeah, Cassie, the only, what I would just add is this will be my 5th HCTS as an employee, but before that I worked for a service provider and went as a client. It's a very good networking opportunity. I learned a lot, as a client, and it really helped me when I was looking to build a business case to launch a cloud-based offer in my previous employer. But it's a very good network opportunity, very good learning opportunity, and it's definitely worth the time invested.
Yeah, and this is Melanie. Along those lines, I'd like to add to what Al said about it being a networking opportunity. As an analyst at 451 for 2 years now, and this will be my 3rd HCTS coming up, I found that the attendees learn a lot from networking with each other, and the 451 participants learn quite a lot too by talking to a broad range of companies who are involved in various aspects of the IT space, and also in the financial community that's covering the IT space. So it's a good learning opportunity all around, and it's a quite engaging and interactive event that I definitely encourage all of you to attend if you can.
Yep, this is Kelly. I'll just jump in to say I definitely know of several firms that have gotten together in partnerships or in M&A activities as a result of meeting at HCTS. So you never know who you'll meet there, and we look forward to seeing everyone there.
Thanks, Kelly, Alan, Melanie. I know that this has been very informative for me. I'm sure the audience feels the same. Before we sign off today, I would just like to let everyone know to please, if you can, leave some feedback for us in the feedback from the audience section of your Bright Talk platform. It really helps us to build our content for these webinars in the future, gives us, a good idea of what you really want to hear from 451 Research, and just helps us provide you the content you want and need. If you can attend HCTS for the great networking opportunities and just great industry-leading content that will be coming out of it, we hope to see you there. The link to our event page is within this slide on the screen, but it is also 451research-hcts.com. Hope to see you there. Thank you, everybody.